Usually when I give these talks, I have a funny anecdote to share, but my team wanted me to be on my best behavior since I'm talking to church folk. But one of the things about being president is you can listen if you want to, but you don't really have to. So maybe I will share. Anyway, the usual story I tell when I'm talking about this is about the two friends, John and Jerry, who go to the same church. And John goes all the time. The pastor always sees him, faithful attendant. But the other guy just comes occasionally. And one time after the service, the pastor stopped him at the door and says, you really ought to be in the army of God. You really should be. He sort of stopped and thought for a minute, and he says, well, Pastor, I am. Except I'm in the Secret Service. So, anyway, those of you in the regular army, those of you in the Secret Service, welcome. So, it took me a long time to figure out what to say this morning, but the title of my talk actually is, The Future is Now, the Past is Now. What is Meharry to do? So first of all, to Dr. Kim Cape, to the members of the General Board of Higher Education, and to all of the staff members who are here, and to my fellow Meharryans, welcome. We are truly, the Meharry family is truly honored to have all of you on our campus, and I am extremely honored to have been asked to deliver this Willson Lecture. I'm one of those who goes and Googles to find information about what it is I'm doing, and when I saw the list of historians and theologians who had given this lecture in the past, it became a little bit more intimidating for me than it might have otherwise have been. The Meharry ties to the United Methodist Church are deep and strong, and so it's especially significant to me as president of Meharry to be asked to give this lecture. And as president, I would like to extend a heartfelt thanks to all of you on behalf of all Meharryans for all that you've done for us over the years. As a matter of fact, the United Methodist Church has been the most significant donor to our student programs and our programs over the years. You actually top the list, and for that we are just tremendously grateful. And the support you provide to our students, as you're going to hear later, is especially deeply appreciated. I'm in my 15th month as president of Meharry, and I start my role in this job at a time of unprecedented change. Meharry is both a healthcare organization and an institution of higher education, and in both of those domains, things are changing rapidly. Furthermore, the students that we train today are very different from the students who came to us just a few years ago. The chief economist at Google has said we've entered into a period of combinatorial innovation. What that means is that because of technology, innovators from different disciplines are collaborating, and the results are nothing short of astounding. I agree with the writer William Gibson, who wrote, "The future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed." Unprecedented changes are being driven by linear factors such as demographics and economics. They're also being driven by nonlinear factors that cause disruptive change, such as rapid prototyping cycles made possible through technologies such as 3D printing. We, my colleagues and I here, have begun defining a 10-year vision for Meharry. 10 years may seem like a long time, but it's actually not in the time that we live in. And the significance of 10 years is also because in 2026, Meharry will celebrate its sesquicentennial, or its 150th birthday. Now, defining such a vision is not a trivial thing, given the rapid pace of change. But organizations such as the AAMC, the Institute of the Future, NIH, the Congressional Budget Office, and the U.S. Census Bureau have produced some reports that give us a picture of what 2026 might look like. By 2026, 20% of the U.S. population will be 65 years old or older, and 90% of them will have a chronic medical condition. By 2026, millennials, those individuals born between 1980 and 2005, will be the largest living generation, and all of them will be digital natives. That is, they've lived their whole lives in the digital age. And if steps are not taken to avoid it, in 2026, spending from the two largest federal trusts, Social Security and Medicaid, will far exceed the income going into these trusts. Also by 2026, data accumulation will be so great it will far exceed human cognition as big data becomes megadata. And machine learning, which is already widespread, will be the order of the day. By 2026, mobile technologies containing sensors for all manner of things, environmental factors, fitness, biological factors, and geographical tracking will be everywhere. And this is going to have profound implications for health and for wellness. The explosion of mobile devices related to healthcare is going to create innovative care models, such as the flipped clinics. And people will have access to care and care data in non-traditional settings. These predictions may seem a bit much, but they appear to me to be highly credible, given how different the world is now in 2016 than it was just a few years ago. There's a group called We Are Social, and they track all things digital around the world. Their data shows that in the last quarter of 2009, on a monthly basis, 100 petabytes of data were either uploaded or downloaded every month. A petabyte is 1,000,000 gigabytes. So 100 petabytes is a heck of a lot of information. Fast forward 5 years to the fourth quarter of 2014, on an average monthly basis, 2,800 petabytes of data were uploaded or downloaded every month. This is an inconceivably large number. It is 2.8 times 10 to the 18th, and it happens to be 1 billion times more than there are stars in our galaxy. And the slope is exponential, which means that in this year, that number is more than double. There are approximately 7.5 billion human beings walking around on the earth, and half of us are now on the internet. About 3.8 billion of us, half of us, we now regularly use a mobile device, and about that number of people are regular social media users. The point is that in just a few short years, the world has become amazingly small because all the human beings who occupy it, virtually all of them, are now interconnected. When I did my medical training in the early 80s, we learned to treat the average patient. We now fully appreciate that no two patients are the same, and the same disease can have a very different course in different individuals. So we have moved from a symptom-based intuitive medicine system to recognitions of patterns and evidence-based medicine. Scientific advances such as genomics, proteomics, visualization technologies, and other technologies have brought medicine to the verge of something truly extraordinary, which we now refer to as precision medicine. Extremely large databases encompassing genetics, epigenetics, lifestyle, environmental factors are going to be used to generate algorithms that will develop specific treatment plans for each individual patient. This is now a national priority, as laid out by President Obama in January 2015, when he launched the Precision Medicine Initiative. And now across the country, a cohort of 1 million individuals, representing all races, ethnicities, and ages, are being enrolled to collect the necessary data. Precision medicine has caught the attention of some multi-billion-dollar companies not known for their interest or focus on healthcare. Intel, Google, Microsoft, and other companies are partnering with healthcare organizations such as Vanderbilt, Harvard, Stanford, and many others This is because big data and data science are integral to precision medicine, and these companies do data and data science exceptionally well. The size and resources of these companies alone are going to drive the precision medicine initiative forward very rapidly. At present, there are many different kinds of data types, lab results, claims, transactions, personal data, etc. But we're rapidly headed for a future in which everything will be centered on the patient, and the integration of all the data and information related to that patient will be housed in one place. The integration will encompass payers, providers, patients, life scientists into a system designed to facilitate accountability, control costs, and achieve the personalization that I've referenced earlier. And as I stated earlier, data and data science are at the heart of making all of this work. The not so well kept secret in all of this is that the future is already here. The future is now. Technologies have been developed in the last few years that seemed like science fiction just a while ago. 3D printers are being used to print artificial heart valves, facial tissues, and other kinds of prosthetics. Incredibly small nanorobots that are a combination of living materials and inorganic materials are being injected into humans even as we speak. DNA molecules are being designed to be information storage devices. And when DNA is used to store information, the capacity will be orders of magnitude greater than anything that we've ever seen before. And keep in mind that DNA is the very fundamental basis for life as we know it. Virtual reality devices are now in use, and they can so precisely recapitulate the human anatomy that they're now being used to train surgical residents to perform surgical procedures hundreds of times before they ever touch a living patient and perform that particular procedure. These are just a few examples of how the future is now, but there are numerous other examples from other disciplines that make it very clear that in a lot of respects, the future is truly now. If we consider certain aspects of healthcare today, one might also conclude that the past is also now. This point is made very well by a medical historian named Elaine Breslaw in her book, Lotions, Potions, Pills, and Magic, Healthcare in early America. Medical historians point out very clearly that there are differences in healthcare in the 1880s and the 1800s compared to today. But surprisingly, there are a large number of things that are quite similar and have been carried over to today. In the early days of American medicine, the understanding of disease were based on ideas that were more than 2,000 years old. These ideas completely lacked any scientific underpinning. All people in the Western world, including physicians, fervently adhered to the notion that diseases were the result of imbalances of bodily fluids or other disturbances in the human body. Disturbances and imbalances were attributed to all manner of things, including evil spirits and miasmas. Treatments were based on restoring the balance, oftentimes by removing bodily fluids through any and every human orifice. These practices had prevailed for centuries, even in Orthodox medicine. During the colonial period, physicians in the U.S. were routinely trained in Europe, or they had apprenticed with a physician who trained in Europe. Those who were trained in Europe at the time allowed nature to heal, and they only sought to ameliorate the symptoms. Most were educated, and they were members of the elite class, and because of that, they could command high fees. And for that reason, most people did not use them, because they could not afford their services. And even though they did not use them, most people held physicians in high esteem, and they were highly respected before the revolution. After independence, everything changed, and physicians lost their social status and were not highly respected at all. Few, if any of them, studied in Europe, and therefore American medicine was cut off from the advances from across the pond. Even fewer physicians had more than rudimentary education, and minimally trained doctors started opening medical schools for profit. To make their schools more appealing to students, quite remarkably, they eliminated any academic requirements for graduation. And as a matter of fact, There were no requirements to learn anatomy, and even at some schools, literacy, basic literacy, was not required to be enrolled. These schools reflected a public that abhorred government regulation or any perceived entrenchment upon the rights of the common man. There were no oversight organizations, there were no licensing requirements, it was a mess. And as their respect declined, doctors started using more and more extreme measures to set themselves apart from their colleagues, such as extreme bloodletting. These and other activities resulted in a free-for-all in the United States related to medicine that was chaotic, and that was the state of medicine at the turn of the century. The picture in Europe was completely different, as doctors there were rapidly turning to medicine based on science and scientific methods. Active ingredients such as quinine were being extracted from herbal medicines. French doctors even used autopsies to begin to understand how the therapies were working or not working. And as a matter of fact, as they evaluated these time-honored traditional therapies, they found them wanting, and they began to change the way they approached their patients. In contrast, in America, physicians totally rejected the notion that science was relevant to medicine. Even one of the most celebrated physicians of that time, Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr., decried this as nonsense. These physicians argued that Americans were physically superior and did not have to follow the lead of their weaker European counterparts. Quite amazingly, even the work of Pasteur and Koch in the second half of the 19th century that clearly linked infectious diseases to microbes was totally rejected by American physicians. The parochial and anti-scientific atmosphere prevailing in the United States at that time was the major reason why medicine in the United States stalled and did not make significant progress. In part, this is the reason why the public viewed poverty and poor living conditions as the major causes of disease. Political leaders believed that people were predisposed to disease because of their low morals and because the poor were, and therefore the poor were responsible for their own sicknesses. It is therefore not a surprise that nothing was done to help citizens who lived in urban slums to alleviate the poor living conditions that might have limited the spread of contagious diseases. To quote Dr. Breslau, and I quote, "The few attempts to control educational standards or to license medical personnel in the face of general public to the laws that might restrict individual freedoms. The forces limiting government power in these areas of health, the proponents of Americans' exceptionalism, and the rejection of the needs of the poor had won their day in the 19th century American medicine." And her question is, will they do so again? This seems to me to be a pretty apt description of much of what is happening in the status of healthcare in the United States, especially in some regions, I might even say in Tennessee. So, for that reason, as I noted earlier, you might say that the past is now. As you will appreciate as I describe this, that prior to 1910, patients in the United States were as likely to be harmed by a physician as they were to be helped by one when they went to that person to be treated. The significance of 1910 is that in that year, Abraham Flexner published a scathing report on the poor quality of medical education that led to the closure of hundreds of medical schools. And quite notably, Meharry was not one of them. As a matter of fact, there were only 2 African-American schools that survived the Flexner report. And Dr. Flexner made special mention of the desirable qualities of Meharry. The Flexner report led to a remarkable transition in medical education with the establishment of a 4-year curriculum in which the first 2 years were basic science and anatomy and the second 2 years were clinical apprenticeships. A century later, it is clear that medicine is again undergoing a necessary period of transition. In 2000, the Institute of Medicine published a report showing that 100,000 people died each year as a result of their hospital stays. In that same year, in conjunction with a report showing that 17.5% of the gross domestic product of the United States is spent on health care. And despite that fact, we have some of the lowest health matrices in all the developed countries. That led to an era of transition and the passage of the Federal Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. Policymakers, employers, provider organizations are all taking steps to reduce the cost of medicine, medical care, and to improve the quality of patient care. The new model that is prevailing is called the patient-centered medical home, that was first developed in the 1960s by pediatricians. This has emerged as a dominant model that's going to be adopted by most care organizations. It represents a paradigm shift because in the past, everything has been centered around the physician. Okay, they were the center of the medical universe. And because of that, patients often had to manage their own care, coordinate their own care, but all of that has changed, such that now the patient is the center of all the attention, and they're going to be taken care of by teams that are integrated and coordinated. One of the main purposes of the patient-centered medical home is to keep patients out of the hospital. And of course, traditionally, students have been trained, primarily medical students, by patients who are hospitalized, using patients who are hospitalized. So this trend toward more outpatient care demands that we change how we think about training new physicians. And many medical schools, including Meharry, are thinking about the appropriate revisions in our curriculum. The patient-centered medical home and the large number of people who have health insurance because of it and because of the Affordable Care Act has increased the need for primary care physicians. And medical schools, including Meharry, are trying to respond to this need, but one of our biggest challenges is we need more federally funded residency slots to solve this problem. I might add that these same changes and challenges are occurring in the world of dentistry as more and more commercial companies are offering amazing packages to dental graduates, and they're more or less money mills, not offering the best of care, but these are some things that we're dealing with as well. So in parallel to all the changes that are happening in medicine, the other domain of our work, higher education, there are changes taking place as well. It has been pointed out a number of times, if you want to know what education was like 1,000 years ago, walk into almost any lecture hall in any university in the country and simply change the language to Greek, and you'll know what education was like 1,000 years ago. This is quite astonishing because the fact that we have not evolved and changed pedagogy in 1,000 years, given all that's happened in the world and to human beings, is amazing. We now understand that the sage on the stage model of teaching, in which a professor stands in front of a large number of students and lectures them, is a great way to teach, but for a lot of us, it's a terrible way to learn. So education experts have demonstrated that all of us have different learning styles, and we as educators need to approach teaching students to acknowledge that fact. And like in healthcare, the cost of attending both undergraduate and professional schools has increased dramatically over the last decade. So like medicine, higher education is undergoing a transformation, trying to find ways to reduce the costs of their product, and technology is driving all of this. Academic health centers have a long history of innovation and discovery, and Meharry, like all other academic health centers, we're feeling the effects of changes in the research domain. You may know that for many years, the National Institutes of Health has been the primary funder of research in medical schools and to a large extent in dental schools as well. Graduate programs that train future scientists rely on funding from NIH, and that's usually through a combination of training grants and major grants to individual scientists. The economic downturn of a few years ago resulted in a near crisis when major academic health centers, Vanderbilt, Stanford, Harvard, all the big players had to cut back sharply on these programs. And you might imagine that if those schools had a challenge dealing with this, small private schools like Meharry without large endowments, this represented a truly major challenge. But we are making adjustments, and our plan is to identify a few key areas of research to focus on develop excellence in those few areas, and then grow from there. One of the things that is really, really important to keep in mind is that data and data science has become a preeminent discipline that cuts across all fields in medicine, and we have to have excellence in it. Extremely large data sets are the norm, as individual scientists can now generate several terabytes of data in a single day. So whether the scientists are sequencing genes, collecting images, working with medical records, all of these things involve large data sets. And so we have developed a data science center, and over the next few years, we're going to grow that to make sure that we have a capacity to incorporate that science into work that we do. These extraordinary challenges frame the context in which I started my work. And as I noted earlier, the future is already here, but it's not evenly distributed. We don't have any notion of trying to catch up. What we want to do is to position our institution to be able to adapt to change and to take a proactive rather than reactive stance where we can foster creativity and innovation. Furthermore, the college has the advantage of being relatively small, and therefore we can be nimble and do some things that the big schools can't even dream about doing. Small groups of individuals and small organizations are doing amazing things and are thriving because they've harnessed the power of technology and are using technology in really amazing ways. I also fully realize that in the current context, a short-term perspective is not going to serve the college well, and that's why we're framing a 10-year vision, which we call Meharry 2026. And as I've noted, in 2026, we celebrate our 150th birthday, and our goal is to make sure that this subsequent centennial decade is a transformative one for Meharry, in which we go from surviving to thriving. Our plan is to evolve the culture here, and I use the term evolution to mean the process by which an organism changes and adapts to its environment in order to survive and outcompete other organisms. We must have a culture that is not intimidated by change, one in which every idea, no matter where the idea comes from, is adopted, and that we celebrate those who have those ideas. In evolution that I'm talking about, the core values that we have and the mission of our college are going to be preserved. As the Meharry family has said, heard me say many times, the one thing that you need when everything around is changing and you're navigating choppy waters, you need a fixed point of reference. And for us, that fixed point of reference is our mission. We're also going to transform our programs and infrastructure. And as I noted, we're training students that are very different than the students before. These are millennials, these are digital natives, and the way they engage the world and each other is totally different. So therefore, we're going to transform our curriculum and transform our infrastructure to meet them where they are. Our pedagogy must be such that these students can get the maximum benefit and be ready for a world that's different when they go out and do their work. There are more than 900,000 physicians in the United States, and less than 6% of them look like me, are African American. And of all the demographic groups in the United States, one of the things that's very disturbing is that African American males are disappearing from the ranks of medical students. As a matter of fact, again, if you look at all the demographics, Hispanic, white, Native American, African Americans are the only group for which female students outnumber male students, and in fact the number of male students is dropping. If we don't do something about it, it's going to be not a good situation. We believe that working with our sister schools, Morehouse, Drew, and Howard, this is an issue that we can tackle and develop a plan that's appropriate for the nation. And as a matter of fact, we believe that it has to be a K-12 approach across the whole continuum, and that is why we're developing programs in partnership with middle schools to try to foster interest in medicine and science at a young age, and then follow those students all the way through. One of our biggest challenges is the cost of attendance of medical school and dental schools. And we've told you already that we have great pride in the fact that our students choose primary care and serving the underserved. But if you graduate owing more than $300,000 in debt, that's going to have a profound influence on your choice of specialty. because primary care physicians happen to be the least well compensated, and you might be more inclined to choose a more lucrative subspecialty if you have that level of debt. So for us, one of our biggest goals is to raise scholarship funds to lower the cost of attendance. And that is one of the reasons why we're so grateful to United Methodist Church for the support you've given us over the years for scholarships and other activities. I've also noted earlier that there's a paradigm shift happening in how medicine is paid for, and we as a healthcare provider must adapt to those changes. And we're already in the process of changing how we do this in order to make sure that we have a sustainable clinical practice and that we can continue to train our students. So one of the things that we have to do in support of all these initiatives, as I've told you, is to grow our faculty. We must, in fact, grow our faculty significantly to fulfill our commitment to our students and to our patients, and to make sure that Meharry has a sustainable future. As I tell my Meharry family all the time, we exist for two groups, the students that we train and the patients that we serve, but none of that can happen without the faculty who teach, do research, and take care of the patients. Meharry's connection to the community is also something we're very proud of, and it's very important part of our legacy. We're going to redouble our efforts to be connected to the community in ways that improve their health and their wellness, not just to the people in North Nashville, but to Tennessee and beyond. We're going to work hard to listen and to provide expertise and assistance to have a positive impact on the lives of our community. But we're going to strive to be what my friend Reverend Ed Sanders we're going to strive to have what he calls cultural humility, which means that we recognize that while the community has a lot to learn from us, we have a lot to learn from the community as well. In closing, let me restate the question that I began with. The future is now, the past is now. What is Meharry to do? Let me answer the question by telling you one of my favorite stories. In the spring of 1826, a white teenager named Samuel Meharry was driving his salt wagon through the backwoods of Kentucky, trying to get to the Ohio River to take a ferry across the river and bring him home. It was late in the day, it was raining, the road was a mess. His wagon slipped off the road and became stuck in the mud. And despite his efforts and the efforts of his two horses, he couldn't get his wagon to budge. So he knew he needed help. He set out to find some help. And he saw in the distance a simple cabin that happened to be the home of an African-American family, recently freed slaves. Now, he stepped up, knocked on the door, and as you might imagine, as a black person, free or enslaved, back in 1826, you might have been very reluctant, in the South at least, to open the door to a young white man. But they did so. He explained his situation, they took him in, gave him something to eat, and the next morning, the father and his son went out and helped young Mr. Meharry get his wagon out of the mud and helped him get on his way. He told them that he didn't have anything, any money, anything way to pay them, but if he ever had the means to do so, he was going to do something for the black race in gratitude for what they had done. 50 years later, in 1876, his promise was fulfilled when a medical department was established at Central Tennessee College, which itself had been established by the Methodist Episcopal Church with a gift of cash and property valued at about $20,000. And this is also done through the Freedmen's Aid Society, which the Meharry brothers had helped to establish. This medical department was established with the sole purpose of serving the needs of African Americans or any other citizens without any means. The founding president, one of the first faculty members, Dr. George Hubbard, taught the first class of Meharry students in the basement of Clark Methodist Church. This is a wonderful story, full of grace and kindness that has defined Meharry's mission from its inception. When young Mr. Meharry saw the flickering light of the oil lamp in that cabin, what he actually saw was a beacon of hope. Some of our students have seen that beacon. Some of our students had applied to many other medical schools, and those medical schools said no, but Meharry had said yes. Some of those same students who were rejected by those schools as students are recruited and accepted as residents. Drawn by Meharry's mission, we've attracted exceptional scientists and clinicians who could have gone elsewhere, but they chose Meharry. I first saw the beacon in 2005 and made my way to Meharry. That beacon has been shining for 140 years, and over the next decade, our goal is to make it shine brighter and brighter. We'll continue to attract amazing students, grateful patients, and outstanding faculty and staff. And I'm proud to stand with all Meharrians to hold up that beacon. The beacon shines light on a past that was full of challenges and strife, but it also shines light on a past that was characterized by grace and the power of faith. That same beacon shines a bright light into a future that's full of hope and promise. And to be sure, there are challenges ahead and there are going to be some rainy, dark days, but our path is going to be lit by the beacon. So, what shall we as Meharrians do in light of standing simultaneously in the past and in the future? We will proudly embrace who and what we are while remaining committed to a noble mission that is boldly stated on our logo. Worship of God through service to mankind. That's what we're going to do. Thank you.